Gross domestic product is an important economic indicator that measures the total economic activity of a country. GDP represents the total value of goods and services produced in a country within a specified period of time, usually a quarter or a year. GDP is considered a vital metric for investors and policymakers, as it provides valuable information about the health of an economy and its future growth prospects. In this video, we will discuss why GDP matters to investors and what it represents. GDP is a crucial indicator for investors as it provides valuable insights into the economic performance of a country. A growing GDP indicates that the economy is expanding, which can lead to more investment opportunities, more employment levels, and a high consumer spending. A strong GDP also indicates that the country is able to generate income, which can lead to a higher standard of living for its citizens. This in turn can have a positive impact on the stock market, leading to higher stock prices and higher return for investors. On the other hand, a decreasing GDP signals that the economy is shrinking, which can lead to decreased investment opportunities. Higher unemployment rates and lower consumer spending, this can have a negative impact on the stock market, leading to lower stock prices and lower returns for investors. Thus, GDP provides investors with valuable information that helps them make informed investment decisions. GDP is the total value of goods and services produced within a country's borders in a specified period of time. It is calculated by adding up the value of all goods and services produced, including government spending, personal consumption, investments, and net exports. GDP can be calculated in two ways: nominal GDP and real GDP. GDP per capita, which is the GDP divided by the total population of a country, is another important metric that provides valuable information about the standard of living in a country. A higher GDP per capita indicates that the average citizen has a higher standard of living, while a lower GDP per capita indicates a lower standard of living. Annual GDP totals are widely used to compare the size of country economies. Policymakers, financial market participants, and CEOs are more interested in changes in GDP over time, which are expressed as annualized rate of growth or contraction. This makes comparing annual and quarterly prices easy. On an annualized basis, the real US GDP expanded by 3.2% in Q3 2022. As annualized rate allows comparison with the 5.7% annual increase in real US GDP in 2021. According to the International Monetary Fund, the United States will have the world's largest economy in 2022, followed by China and Japan. The Bureau of Economic Analysis publishes GDP numbers in both nominal and real, or inflation-adjusted terms in the United States on a monthly basis. The BEA produces an advance estimate of the previous quarter's GDP 1 month after the end of each quarter. In the 2 months that follow, the Bureau issues second and third estimates that include previously unavailable data. While the GDP can be deconstructed in a variety of ways, the most popular is to consider it to be the sum of a country's private consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. The GDP components of consumption and investment are more dependable economic indicators than government spending or net exports. The 3.2% yearly growth in US GDP in the third quarter of 2022 was mostly due to an increase in exports, consumer spending, government expenditure, and investment. GDP can be calculated in either nominal or real terms. Nominal GDP is computed using the value of the products and services created as they are collected. Thus, it includes not only the value of output, but also changes in the collective price of that output. In other words, in an economy with a 5% annual inflation rate, nominal GDP will rise 5% per year due to price increases even if the quantity and quality of goods and services provided remain constant. The annualized growth rate of real GDP in the United States in the third quarter of 2022, following an annualized fall of 0.6% in the second quarter of 2022. Real GDP, on the other hand, is inflation adjusted, which means it takes into account changes in price levels in order to estimate changes in actual output. Because inflation-fueled gains aren't economically beneficial, policymakers and market places a premium on real GDP. To estimate real GDP, the BEA creates chain indexes that allow it to adopt the value of goods and services to change in their prices. There are 3 major methods for measuring GDP. The first is to total up what everyone earned or spent in a year. Logically, both measurements should result in around the same sum. The income approach, often known as GDP, is the sum of total compensation provided to employees, corporate earnings, and taxes less subsidies. The previously discussed expenditure technique is the most usual methodology, and it is computed by adding private consumption and investment, government spending, and net exports. Finally, GDP can be calculated using the value of products and services produced. Because economic output necessitates expenditure and is then consumed, all three approaches for calculating GDP should all provide the same result. To compute a country's GDP using the spending technique, the following simplified equation is frequently used. BEA's GDP estimates for the United States are based on national income and product accounts for sectors such as corporations, households, non-profit organizations, and governments. NIPAs are created by combining 7 summary accounts that track receipts and outlays for each of those sectors. BEA GDP reports by state and industry are also based on detailed NIPA data. Due to a lack of trustworthy data, the BEA's GDP estimates exclude unlawful activity, childcare, and volunteer work. According to a BEA analyst, counting unlawful activity would have increased nominal US GDP by more than 1% in 2017. Simultaneously, the GDP data include BEA estimates of what homeowners would have paid to rent identical housing, ensuring that the GDP does not rise every time an owner-occupied home is rented. GDP statistics, in addition to providing a complete assessment of economic health, provide insights into the factors or restraining economic development. Economic health, as measured by changes in GDP, has a significant impact on financial asset prices. Stronger economic growth is positively connected with share prices because it tends to translate into better business profitability and investor risk appetite. Stronger GDP growth, on the other hand, might harm fixed income investments such as bonds by making their yields less appealing on a relative basis. GDP figures, while providing a thorough evaluation of economic health, are not a leading economic indicator, but rather a glimpse in the rearview mirror. Market monitor GDP figures in relation to those that came before them, as well as other more time-sensitive data in relation to consensus expectations. In some circumstances, gross national product, which quantifies output from inhabitants and businesses of a specific nation, regardless of location, is seen as a better measure of output than GDP. For example, GDP does not account for earnings earned in a country by international enterprises and paid to foreign investors. This can lead to an overestimation of a country's actual economic output. In 2012, Ireland had a GDP of $210.3 billion and a GNP of $164.6 billion. With the $45.7 billion disparity owing primarily to profit repatriation by foreign corporations based in Ireland, GDP growth cannot be used to assess a country's development or the well-being of its population. For example, a country's high GDP growth may come at a major cost to society in terms of environmental effect and increased income disparities. Discussions regarding GDP growth always revert to China's blistering pace of growth since the late 1970s and India's during the 1990s. Following rejuvenating economic reforms, smaller nations such as the Asian tigers, Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea, and Taiwan have already achieved rapid economic growth during the 1960s by focusing on their competitive assets and becoming export dynamos. Despite their large populations, China and India have succeeded, with an average GDP growth rate of 10% in China since 1978, and a slower growth rate in India allowing hundreds of millions to escape poverty. While emerging markets and developing countries have been expanding faster than the developed world during the 1990s, the gap in growth rates has begun to decrease after the Great Recession ended in early 2009. A single GDP number, whether a yearly total or a rate of change, offers just the most basic economic information. In this sense, it is a critical tool for assessing the state of economic activity. In conclusion, GDP is a crucial economic indicator that provides valuable information about the economic performance of a country. It matters to investors as it provides valuable insights into the health of an economy and its future growth prospects, which can help investors make informed investment decisions. And with that being said, it's time to end our video. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing videos like this. We'll see you with another interesting video.